Hey guys, it's Mr. Mini Painter and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to show you how I painted the Wardrakes of Rhûn. They have just been released by Games Workshop. I received them this week and I immediately started painting them because they look amazing. Now the fun thing about these minis is that they're not really from the movies, they're not in any official Hobbit or Lord of the Rings movie, but they are set in the Middle Earth world. And I think we can expect a lot more of these miniatures in the near future. There is going to be a catapult troll coming out very soon. So we're going to have a lot more of these characters listed under the name Armies of Middle Earth. Now I'm going to show you how I painted the Wardrakes. And these are the guys we're talking about, the Wardrakes of Rhûn from the Armies of Middle Earth. Now, I was really excited to open this one up. The building is half the fun, for me at least. And with these two guys, you have two different build options each. So you can choose, for example, to have an open mouth or closed one, and the position of the head is changeable from two different options. Well, I chose this one for the first, with his mouth wide open, looking kind of downwards. I love the position on the rocks they are climbing down from, this guy. There were some tiny gaps I had to fill before continuing, and I added some modeling sand to the base. And here's the other one. I chose the head with the closed mouth looking upwards. So I had two different kinds to go from. I chose two different colors as well, and I'm going to show you how I did that using contrast paints. Now for the first one I used lotrsbg yellow for the bottom of the miniature. So basically on about half of the model there are some spikes pointing outwards, which I kind of used as a reference for the middle of the mini, and everything below I painted with this lotrsbg yellow. Now the reason I'm doing contrast paint is for many reasons. One, it's very hard to reach when you pre-assemble the model. Of course, this can be debatable whether you should or should not do that before, but I wanted to have a continuous color along the paws of the mini and the rest of the body, so I did glue it together. Now the reason I'm using contrast paint is also that because when you use it and you thin it down a bit, you can kind of build up layers and you get this nice, well, it's in the name, contrast. So you get some darks, some lights, all in one brush stroke. Now the second color I used and kind of blended together is Gryph-hound Orange. And when touching the yellow parts, I kind of blended it with the previous layer by adding some water. Very, very little, otherwise it gets way too runny and the color is blends too well. And I want a transition from the dark from his back to the bright on his belly. So you kind of build it up in colors as a gradient, and this is a perfect color to blend with the yellow I used before. And I'm going to use some browns on his back. Now you can see here there is a nice dried up transition color from the bright yellow on his belly to a bit of darker orangey look halfway, and we're going to pick it up from there by adding some browns. And for that I'm also using a contrast paint Gorgranta Fur, which is a nice orangey brown look, so it really works well with the previous colors. And I'm applying it on the scales of his body. So the top part of his legs, his tail, the entire back of course, is built from scales, and you can see these tiny dots alongside his body. So that was basically the position I chose to blend those colors together. Now you're not gonna see a lot of orange when we're finished, but the transition works, and basically that's the only gain I'm going after. Now it's not really bad if you touch the armor above, so make sure that the color is nice and deep inside those recesses below his armor. Otherwise you're gonna see some gray left from the primer, and you do not want that. And again, here I'm using, at the very edges where we're touching the other color, I'm using some water to kind of blend those colors together. So you see me starting quite heavy with a layer and kind of smear it out from left to right or up and down. And the last step I'm using whilst the contrast paint is still wet is kind of add some water to my brush and push or pull the paint towards the part that I want it to be. And that way you can kind of fade in the color. Now his back I gave, I think I did even 2 layers to darken it down a little bit, but we're going to take it a tiny step further on the scales on his back. And for these scales I'm using Black Templar, again a contrast paint because it blends really well with the previous colors. And the fun thing about these contrasts when applying as a second layer is that you can still see the previous layer under it. So you kind of skip the step of highlighting those scales because you still see those brown edges on the sides, so edge highlighting is not really needed anymore. So it saves a lot of time and the effect is beautiful. So I applied this Black Templar only on the top scales. So again you have a transition in a total of 4 colors now. Now the other model I used Gutripper Flesh as a base tone, also a contrast paint, but I love this bright green and I wanted to have 2 different kind of drakes, 2 colors, otherwise they would be way too similar and this is a lot more fun. Again, this Gutripper is a nice green that you can thin down at the belly of this beast by adding some water, so you get some dark and bright transitions. So don't do it all in one layer. Better to thin it down and go over the sides twice, or the other way around, cover the entire model and add some water to the belly to kind of thin it down. And that way you get a nice gradient from light to darker. Also with this one I'm adding some Nasdreg yellow to blend the colors together, and the green and yellow, they're so close to each other that it gives a great effect. I'm going to use a dark top, but I wanted it to be a gradient as well, so not just green and black, but add a little more hue to the mix. And this was a beautiful end result. The top I'm using Black Templar, pure Black Templar on the base color of the game, or on the gray I used. And again, focus on all the scales, so the dots that you see on his upper legs, the side of his belly to more or less halfway, and of course the scales on top. And also here you kind of wet blend those colors together by adding some water to your brush. You can fade out the black towards the green to make those colors work together. And you see the nice thing of this thin down paint is that you can still see the green shining through his through the black on his legs, and that way the colors really work well together. Now I'm using Nasdreg yellow again to cover a little bit of the black and make those colors work together a little bit better. So it's kind of the same layer again, but just to pick up the black here and there. Then, before continuing, I'm doing some Mechanicus Standard Gray on the base. Usually it's the part I end with, but because this is a really hard to reach part of the mini, because it's entirely under the miniature itself, I chose to do it up front, just to be sure that I'm not touching anything later on when the entire model is finished. When done, I'm applying a heavy wash of Nuln Oil all over the rock. And the modeling sand on the base, I used Garagax Sewer. It's a nice dark sandy look that I really enjoy using on most of my minis And we're now going to focus on these spikes on his body with Karak stone. I painted the top and bottom of these spikes. They're on his tail, on the side of his body, up until his front legs. There are many of them. So please take your time, paint all of them until you have something like this. And you see the spikes running all around from front to back with this nice bony color. I also did the nails on his paws. Then with some Agrax Earthshade, we're washing all of those spikes. Now you can see me switching from one model to the other, but of course we're applying the same colors to both the drakes. Because the rest on out, it's the same as far as colors go. So I washed the Agrax Earthshade on all the spikes to create some nice dark transition from the body to the tip. And for the tip itself, I'm using Screaming Skull as a highlight color and kind of focus on the very sharp edges on the side or the top, whatever you prefer, and at least make sure that the tip itself is nice and bright so it looks sharp. The part closest to the body you would like to leave alone as much as possible and remain dark, so you get a nice transition from the dark scales to the bright tip. Now as a base coat for the gold armor, I'm using Brass Scorpion as a starting point. It's nice and dark and we can build up the gold from there. There is a lot of armor on his front legs, his back, his head, but make sure that there are some scales between the armor on his back and the part on his hat. So don't make sure that you know what to paint. You can still see those spikes coming through the armor, the spikes on his back, so leave them with the previously painted scale color. Just paint around it, which can be tricky. And at the end it should look something like this. So you still see the spikes coming through, the armor on his head, and the rest of his head is uncovered. Now we're going to paint the inside of the armor with Auric Armor Gold. Or any other gold if you want. I chose this one because it's a bit bright, which contrasts well with the base color. And what I tried to do here is leave some of the brass shining through on the very edges of the armor plates. So you get some shade effect. Now to emphasize the shade, I'm using Agrax Earthshade once the armor is dried, and focused on the edges, so you get some dark edges there. Also on the legs, of course. Now to highlight it, I'm using Canoptic Alloy. It could be a silver color, but I thought a Stormhost Silver was too intense to start with, so I ended up doing it as a final highlight. But for now I painted every edge, also all the bolts that hold the armor together with this Canoptic Alloy, and create some sharpness to the leg armor. Then I decided to use some Stormhost Silver to the very tips of the spikes on his leg and the corners of the armor to add some extra shine to it. Now the trick I'm doing here is using Art Coat to cover all of the armor, and the fun thing because it's a varnish, it adds a shine, a glow to the armor, making it look like it's really smooth looking, reflecting. It's a tiny detail, but I like it. Then some Gal Vorbak red on the bands around his front legs. They're like straps holding the armor together. The inside is really hard to reach, so be very careful here. I accidentally touched the rock I painted before, which is no big deal. You can just go over it with some gray again, but it would be a shame if you destroyed your mini. I then washed everything with Carbro Crimson. I'll let that dry for a while. You get some nice subtle shades in there. And then I highlighted the straps, the edge highlight with Bugman's Glow added to the Galvorbag red. There's a very tiny subtle edge highlight there. Then the straps holding his armor in place I painted with Rhinox hide. The straps go all around his belly, and the problem here is the same reachability. Well, you'll get there in the end. I edge highlighted that with Baneblade Brown. Again, a tiny edge highlight to define it a bit more. It's extremely small, but I think I managed. We're nearly getting there now. I used Bugman's Glow to paint the inner part of the eyelid. It's a tiny detail, but it adds just that little bit of extra color to the miniature. Of course, it stands out a bit more with the green one. Then the inside of the eye I painted with gray cere. Now I'm going for a black eye, but I picked it up with some gray first to add black Templar over it, so it kind of shines through. So it's not entirely black, but like a shiny gradient of gray, dark, black, whatever. And I also tipped it with some art coats to add some extra shine to it. Now, one of my miniatures has this open mouth, and I used Screamer Pink as a base color for the tongue and the inside of his mouth, the gums or whatever. I washed that with some Carbro Crimson all around, and then started working on the teeth. The teeth I picked out with some Carrick Stone. There's a lot of them. And I then used a kind of a heavy wash of Nuln Oil inside his beak, so you get some shade between the teeth and the gums. A tiny black line, as you can see here, up as well as down. And those teeth really stand out now. Then I took some Castellan Green and added some extra detail to the body. Some tiny specks on the bright green part of the legs, as if it were like an overflow of the previous darker top color, going further down his legs, if you know what I mean. Just some tiny details. And I used this Rhinox hide on the other model as a brown on his lower part, the tail, the lower legs. Just some extra detail if you want. And then dry brush the rock with some gray cere to create some sharpness. Add some foliage to the base if you want, some greens or whatever you prefer, and you're done. Now here's my final result of the two Wardrakes of Rhûn. I absolutely love how they turned out. I hope this video was of any help to you guys, and if you like this kind of content, please consider subscribing to the channel, like, and please leave a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. And I hope to see you in one of my next videos where we will be painting a lot more of the Lord of the Rings miniature range. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in one of my next videos. Bye bye!